do dig this music. Every time I hear it, I start to...
Yeah, but that's the point. You don't want to take things too
like
seriously, I mean, it's not... I mean, it's... You got to have fun talking about serious stuff,
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Just relax a little.
And I think that this music gets us into that. Oh,
yeah.
I feel like I said this before. I feel like I'm on vacation. It feels it's like a vacation vibe.
Isn't that like activating like the parasympathetic nervous system, right? Like when you pet your cat or your dog, it makes you feel much better, and the music, puts you in that state to be. Let me learn what this people have to say.
I don't know what it's called, but it definitely does something to my system.
Yeah, I think it is the parasympathetic system, but
okay.
Anyways.
Hello, Soul Questers. Thanks so much for joining us on another episode of a Soul's Quest podcast. So, I'm Jessie, your host, and this is my husband,
Omar.
Yeah. Thank you. I almost forgot. Actually, what I was going to say is my life partner, my friend, my best friend, my buddy.
Oh, you're so mushy.
Oh,
it's nice.
I didn't want to get mushy, though, for all of our guests.
you do get a little sloppy once in a while,
I can't help it.
It's okay.
You are my buddy.
That's right.
You are my buddy.
And wherever you go, I go, my buddy. Wherever you go.
Okay.
Kid,
right.
sister.
Okay. All right. Time out. Okay. So today we are going to be talking about evolution.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
You're acting surprised, but we've been watching a documentary on evolution for the last couple of days, and it's been interesting, actually. So you knew I was going to bring this up at some point.
I know, but I can't just, the anticipation and you got to build the stage for it. You can't just be like, you're like,
I'm not a good actress.
It's okay.
Apparently, I'm not a good actress. So.
No. You know, it's like you like to get to business. It's like, let's go.
I do.
Yeah, you just get to it. Get to it.
What's my deal?
Yeah. You have things to do?
No.
I mean, we all have things to do.
Just schoolwork and, stuff like that, but nothing serious.
Okay, but, everybody got things to do, so.
Yeah, and we don't want to keep our guests waiting for all this exciting information.
We should kind of like build up the anticipation. Evolution.
Okay. Evolution.
What?
So, yes, my question to you then, just because we're going to get into business, is really because we've been watching this documentary the last couple of days, and it's been very interesting.
And just to mention, the name of the documentary is Professor Richard Dawkins, The Life of Charles Darwin.
Correct.
And you can find it on YouTube.
On YouTube, exactly.
We'll put a link on the description below so people could take a look at it.
Great. That would be good because I think it would be interesting for some people to watch. There's a couple of parts to it, but it's really interesting stuff. So it's worth the watch. But basically, and I do have my notes, just saying, is basically why is understanding evolution relevant, or how is it applicable to a soul's quest?
Yeah, I mean, evolution is important for us to understand. Traditionally, we only apply evolution to the physical world, right? In biology, anthropology, and things of that nature, right? So when you look at evolution in The Origin of Species that Darwin wrote, you see the progression of starting from a one-cell organism to a diverse group of life forms. And that's always a controversial idea because it goes right in contrast with the creation argument. God created
the word.
The word. God created the word. In the beginning, it was God. So those two things are always in conjunction. However, from my point of view, and I think that evolution in the terms of understanding how it happens, how natural selection picks and chooses, or how it arises. It's important to understand from the practical reason of procreation, yes, because you have to procreate, but also how a life, how a soul, a community, a society, our human species, how we also evolve. Because it's not just a matter of the physical form, it's also our ideas, our thoughts, how we structure our family, our society, what we understand as what a union is, what a tribe is, what a community is. You know, all those units are not static things. You know, they keep evolving, and ideas evolve, right. and just like it happens in the natural world, there's ideas that deviate from each other. Love that word, deviate.
Me too.
Yeah. Shout out to Fred.
Shout out to Fred.
Yeah. So ideas deviate from each other. And then what happens is, like, when it comes to that point of separation, that's what conflict happens, right? So, you know, when the one thing that is more recent for us, at least in the last 70 years, is being like the Cold War, you know, two ideas, communism, capitalism, facing each other, you know, in an existential threat.
Okay.
But an idea that worked, an idea that didn't work, or an idea that is still in progress, and we'll see what happens with capitalism in the next few years or so. But it's an evolution of ideas that's important, and I think that's what is relevant to A Soul's Quest.
Okay. So when you say that, the relevance is basically the fact that, in basic terms, is from what you're telling me, is that we're constantly in flux.
Okay. So yeah, because what happens in the big picture, in the universe picture, happens in the micro. The macro, you know, it's a reflection of the micro and vice versa, just in a broad scale. Right. So when you have an individual that is aware, makes conscious decisions, and chooses its own path, that individual decision, and is as insignificant as it might be, right, has a big impact on the whole. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So in this documentary, right, Richard Dawkins mentions the fact that there was an ape being, and that ape from that particular ape, two apes deviated. Right. One of them became a chimp, and the other one became us. Right. Right. So
it's like the tree.
Yeah.
Where it splits off.
Exactly, where it splits off. So when you see that idea, you look at it just from the nature standpoint, and then that's when you only look at the physical, that's when bad things come about. You know, we're going to talk about things like eugenics, genocides, and things of that nature, because the idea is that one thing is better than the other. It's just a deviation of it, a separation of it. But it all stems from the same thing. You know, so in the narrow it, why is it important? Is because that individual soul. This is why I believe that people are so important, and what is so important for people to understand their responsibility and their sense in the world, because you as a person could be that deviation in the road. You know, that could either propel the species forward in a way that causes less pain, or deviates in a way that causes a lot of pain, and everything between.
Right.
So understanding that biological premise of evolution, and again, right now, evolution keeps happening. You know, every idea that you see has taken us into a different direction, right? Came from a single individual, then a collective of a few, making those choices.
Yeah, making those decisions.
Yeah. So that's why it's so important to people to understand their
impact.
Their impact. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what situation they're in. You know.
Yeah, there's nothing no situation is less than or insignificant.
No.
You know what I mean?
But the problem with evolution too is that, and my biggest qualm with science is that we over categorize things. And by doing so, when you over-categorize things, the problem is that people start saying, well, this one's better than this, or this is better than that. And you start comparing and contrasting without realizing that we all share 99% of the DNA with every single living thing that exists, or every material thing that exists. So there's really, the separations are just minimal.
Right.
Right.
That's so interesting, because now you just made me think of something completely, like, it's probably not even I think it is relevant here, but is that whenever I think about when people say like, what religion are you? Where do you go to church? Whatever. I often, or most often, I will reply with, I'm agnostic. I'm a very spiritual person. I believe that there is this force, this energy that transcends everything, you know what I mean? And that it's universal. It goes through all of us. And that's an extension of God, or whatever it is that you want to call that force, that energy.
Yeah.
And I believe in that. And you just made me think of that.
See, that's interesting to me too, because again, I could just only imagine, and this is just me just imagining, when the first person that was conscious, right? Like, and they just standing there and they say to themselves, who am I and what am I doing here? Think about that person, right? And from the moment that we humans became conscious of things and we asked those questions, right? What you see is a question and an evolution of an answer, right? For instance, right? You talked about religions. You know what the word religion means?
Tell me.
So religion, according to Joseph Campbell and he's one of the main people, it means link.
One of his definitions.
Yeah, okay. Is to link back to an original source.
Okay.
Right? So if the original source is to answer why are we here, right? Then you could actually start thinking about it. Well, if it was me, I will think we're here for something else, for something in the future. I think that we are here for just because. You could start really thinking and formulating ideas about why you are here, right? So if you go out there and you start thinking of an idea, right? Let's say, for instance, Greek mythology. I've really been into like Greek mythology lately, right? In Greek mythology, really what it is a set of stories. There's a lot of stories that kind of like showcase the powers of individual gods and the effect that they have on people, right? So if you try to make sense of the world and you want people to stay together, you start telling stories, right? So this is what we do, we tell stories. So like Tracy Chapman said, there's a friction in the space between the lines of the page, the memory. Write them down, but it doesn't mean you're not just telling stories, right? So our culture, our society, humanity has only evolved because of stories, right? So a story is that it's a story, but what's behind the story? What's the purpose, right? So when you start evolving, let's say Greek mythology, you got all the gods in the beginning of the earth and the gods fighting and in conflict. And then you got gods, philandering with humans and mortals. What is that? You read that, it's like, oh my God, I could understand. I got to be my best behavior and I got to honor the gods. I got to do all this because my life depends on it. Right. But then you start getting more ahead and more advanced. You start thinking, like, wait a minute. Well, I did this and did that, and the gods never punished me. So maybe there is no God, right? And then you get into episode like the Odyssey, right? In which this guy just Odysseus just defies the gods constantly. And he's like, you know what? Whatever. Poof, right? And he's like, you know what? From now on, I'm a man and I'm going to make my own choices. But throughout that, the definition of the world was based on the stories being told by the gods. But the evolution of Odysseus was like, no, that's not true. Some people still believed in those gods and they got stuck with that idea, but Odysseus kept going. Okay. Right? Mm-hmm. So you could see how you could get stuck with an idea and then an idea evolved, right? So from Greek mythology comes, that's a lot of different gods, and then we have the evolution, or better yet, the consolidation of gods into one God, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the God of the Old Testament, our God, the current idea of God, whatever. It's a consolidation of an idea because, again, you could have to use that as I wouldn't call it a control mechanism. Or how do you keep a society, a structure of people that are constantly fighting? You have to, help them to believe in just one thing. Mm-hmm. And as an ideas progress, just like that. And then we get to a point now in which we question a lot of our teachings in religion, because our minds have expanded, our experiences have opened us up to possibilities, and kind of like make us realize, well, wait a minute, that doesn't really work, But you have, holding on to the idea of life ever after is a strong thing, because life without that is very scary. Right. So looking at evolution from that point of view, it's like you could see both our physical evolution. Mm-hmm. From being just a single cell animal to just being who we are, our capacity of thinking, our capacity of creating, our capacity to be unbound and free from the dangers of nature,
right,
to all that stuff.
So you said that it was or one of the ideas, the God being one of the ideas. I honestly, and it's not that I don't agree with you, but I think it's probably the idea of most people. That's the primary thought, is that there's a God, right? Mm-hmm. So with that said, how do people who believe in God and know about evolution and the word of God and then the evolution piece, right? How do individuals reconcile that? Like, how do they come to terms with that? Like, because there are some people who really do believe that, like you just said,
it's a truth,
that the word of God says that this is what's going to happen. This is how we were made. God made us. He took, this is what we were made from. This is how it happened. This is our evolution, or our process. But the science based evolution is, so how do people reconcile?
When I lived
how do you feel about that?
Yeah. When I lived in Orlando, and I went to when I was going to college over there, for some reason I was always caught up in this religious jiu-jitsu arguments with people, right? Because I was in
jiu-jitsu. Oh, I get it.
Yeah, like I constantly fighting.
You lost me there. Sorry.
With people about ideologies and religions and all that kind of stuff. So the first question that I ask, is define God. Mm-hmm. So in your words, how do you define it?
Well, it's like I said earlier, I believe that, first of all, I'm an agnostic individual. I'm very spiritual. I believe that there is this energy that, let me put it this way. I believe in evolution. I believe that that science, I'm convinced by that.
Okay.
And I believe that we are an extension of God, of that energy. If we'll call it God for the purposes of people that watch this, but I think that it's a very strong energy that we all possess, and all of us possess it. Each one of us has that, because how is it? And that's that thing is, like you were saying, how, we have the ability to think and make decisions and be and reason and make choices between what's good and what's bad. Am I going to cause suffering, or am I going to do what's right? I believe that is an energy. So for me, that to me defines my religious beliefs. If I have to put a label on it, because I don't have a religious belief per se, and I don't want to come across as an atheist, because I'm not an atheist. But I think that that's an energy that lives within each of us, and that we all have the capacity to either build something up and make it amazing, or destroy it. We have that capacity. We have that potential, and that's deep, because for an individual who doesn't feel like they have any, like we've talked about purpose on this show, people who don't feel like they have a purpose, that says a lot. That somebody, that you have that much power, says a lot, in my opinion. That's how I feel about it.
So like I was telling you earlier about ideas becoming static, right? And becoming set. the cool thing about science, right, and that you have to appreciate is that you understand, like you just mentioned, you just defined in your definition of it. It's like, I know that there is some type of an energy out there. I don't know what it is, but I know that is there because I feel it within me.
Right.
You know, it's like, how is it that this entire planet and this entire universe arises, right? Mm-hmm. And it's there, and people are peopling, and trees are birds, and all this that there's something.
People are peopling. I love that.
I heard that from I think it was like Wayne Dyer or something that said that one time.
That's awesome.
You know, that comes from somewhere, right? Yeah. That is a great question. And I think scientists, there's positives and negatives of anything. You know, there's scientists that say, well, we investigated all this. There's no possibility that this could happen. So this is completely erroneous and this is completely wrong. Right? There's scientists that say that.
Yeah.
But there's scientists that say, well, we don't have the technology and we don't have the know-how to be able to identify what this is yet. Because if you remember, 150 years ago, or 200 years ago, we didn't have electricity. Right?
Right.
And people will say, well, that's not going to happen. And out of the blue, somebody came up with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what I see is this. What I see is that deviation in the idea of God. There's people that think that they have it figured out, and this is it. And whatever, if you are outside of this area and you don't think like I do, then you have it completely wrong. But again, that's an ever evolving question.
Yeah.
Right? Because we have already learned, right, that there is no God in the sky. There is no God in the ocean. There's no Poseidon, right? Mm-hmm. There's no Aphrodite. There's no Zeus. We've already investigated those areas, and we have eliminated the fact that we know, okay, well, there's no God there.
Right.
Right? We also know, and now I think that we understand that nature itself is neither feminine nor masculine. It just is.
Right.
So once we begin to understand that, but you have that idea of being so bent, you know, this is what I believe
in.
Rigid. Mm-hmm. Without completely following the evolution of the question, because we don't know where the question is going to end up. Right?
Right.
That's where we are right now. And that's kind of like the stuff that we have to look back at the idea of evolution, and on understanding that, begin to address this situation that we're in right now.
Okay, so that makes sense to me. So then the next question that I have is, do you think that a person who has a strong belief and a strong faith mm-hmm. in God can also believe in evolution? Like, can that happen?
It could happen.
I mean, I'm just asking your opinion because I don't know.
It could happen if that person is open to the idea that there is no set of ideas that we know of yet that could define the idea of God. You know, it's kind of redundant. So even you may have a certain set of ideas or experiences that you believe, but you have to understand that is limiting, because you can't. There's no one idea that encompasses everything. You know, so that idea of itself, it's limited. So you're limiting the potential of what you want the idea of God to be.
Right.
You know, because we don't know. You know, we've gone into outer space and we don't even understand everything that's on outer space yet. We are discovering things. We are every day a person evolves and finds something different, either within themselves that they pass on by their actions in our world. But the problem is that when you stay there and you get stuck, then that's when you start separating yourself from everybody else and you become the others. You start labeling people the others. They're different. We are better. We are chosen. Holding on to any idea, right? And not without the understanding that ideas evolve, it's problematic, right? Bob Marley has a song, Revolution. War.
Are you gonna sing it?
And it's actually the beginning of a speech between Selassie I, the king of Ethiopia, at the UN, right? So he says, until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior, right? It's finally and terminally discredited and abandoned, there will always be war, right? What is war? War is conflict, right? Because you have an idea that is set against an idea that wants to break from that, or a group that wants to break from that, right? That's the problem. It's okay for you to believe in God, and it's okay for you to live according to those principles if that's how you want to conduct your life,
right?
But the moment that you begin, and this happens not just in religion.
This happens in politics a lot, because people are very they believe. This happened in our recent presidential term, where there were people who were really, really firm believers in Trump, and this is not going to be a political thing, but it's a point. People were firm on that, and they didn't want to deviate from that. And there were people who were firm on Obama or Biden, and they didn't want to deviate from that.
Correct.
And it was a matter of being able to step back and see the perspectives of both sides and take bits and pieces from that to make a decision that was best for our country. And no matter what, people were going to be unhappy. But then you had those fights, and obviously we've seen what took place. I mean, people died from this stuff.
And to me, I'm sitting back and I'm saying, this is ridiculous, because
it is.
Both sides have really valid points,
and both sides have negative,
and both sides have points that is like, oh, wait a minute, what's
going on here?
It's like any extreme is bad in and of itself. But to say that both of them were like, okay, this is what Trump, some of the things that Trump did, I really truly agree with. Other stuff, it was like, no, dude, come on. Do I agree with some of the things that Biden has done? No, but there's some things that, okay, he's doing that, okay. And so it's like, evolution, again, going back to that idea, is that you can't just hold on to an idea and say that is it. An idea is that. A law is something completely different.
Well,
gravity.
That's the reason why
if you throw this up, right, it's going to come down. That is a law.
But evolution is not a law.
Evolution is not a law.
It's just a theory.
It's a theory. It's an experience too.
Yes. Yeah. No. I agree.
And it's a fact that things. So here's one of the things that they ask in the documentary, right? What is the goal of evolution? Right? That's almost asking the same question as what is life's purpose?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
that's a good point.
What is the point of the guy comes across cuts a grass or cuts the limbs and the tree still grows? Like, what's the purpose? Why can't you just, I'm not going to grow anymore? It just does.
Right.
It
just happens.
It keeps happening. Right. That's the idea of an objective and a purpose. It's very confusing.
Right.
And when you get held to that, right? To that idea that this is the purpose, that is the beginning of tyranny. That is the beginning of you oppressing another individual, because your idea is superior to the way that they want to live their lives. Right. Now, you may not agree, and it's okay to deviate in a friendly way. You want to go that way? Sweet, go, do your thing. I'm going to go this way. That's okay.
Right. But to cause suffering, pain on that person because they don't see things the way that you do is not okay. And that's an important aspect of
now this is when it gets funky too, in my opinion. This is when it gets a little funky, right? Because again, this is the idea of societies of democracy to talk about things is, you can't have 100% people doing whatever the hell they want to do. That's chaos. That's anarchy. Right. Everything will go in its own way. And you can't have on the other side the over oppression of things, right?
There has to be a balance.
So the natural way, right? It's conflict, because in order for ideas to move forward, conflict happens.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with conflict. That is a healthy conflict.
Well, not necessarily.
Well, but isn't it okay to be able to debate things and to be able to talk about things and be able to have this back and forth and whatnot? But agree to disagree and shake hands and we're gonna be for a pump. Now we're pumping.
Yeah, we're pumping.
Elbow.
Yeah,
but
it is. It is. However, there's still things that we have to go through that we haven't got. Some people at that point, some people are there.
Yeah.
Some people are like, okay, we could figure this out in a way that is conducive but not everybody has evolved up to that point.
No, okay.
Or in the way that we think, and there's still a lot of animal things that we have in our.
But that's gonna happen from forever. It's just the way it is.
No, not necessarily, because we are evolving, and our morality and the way that we treat each other and the way that we treat our planet is beginning to change. It's beginning to evolve if you see it. I mean, little by little you start to see it. Again, we are talking right now about ideas that take a look at the things in the back without man, those people are stupid. We're not saying that. It's like they were evolving and they were trying to understand their world.
They did with what they had.
With what they had, and this is what they have, and they haven't been open to, and they need to be open. But we're not condemning those people. No. If I come across like that, I truly apologize. It's not about condemning them. It's about understanding that was one way of thought, and you and I are talking about something a little bit more, I wouldn't call progressive, but a little bit more Western. Right, in terms of letting people decide how they want to live their life, which is the basis of Western civilization,
freedom
and freedom. But instead of the conflict, and instead of following those rules of nature, right? That animal impulses,
the animalistic,
right? Those that impulse to control, to fight, to kill, to do all those things, to stamp all over somebody else. Like, we're beginning to evolve past that, and I think that if we consciously evolve in our quest towards making decisions and living our lives based on that, then those evolutions are going to be less painful.
You sort of are answering the question that I had next, which was when we were watching the documentary, there was the part that they talked about where they said, because it's evolution, they're in the animal world, it's survival of the fittest. It's a dog eat dog world.
Correct.
It's like, and it is brutal. Like,
yes.
I never, until I saw this documentary, I knew about it. I wasn't like I was like a virgin to this, but it was very like, oh wow, that like hits me in the feels, because these are animals and they're like attacking each other in the middle of the night and like, but this is their survival. That's what they know. That's what they have to do. They're always on guard. They're always so. You sort of touched on that now, and I can appreciate that, but like. What do you think of that in terms of how we've evolved and how, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You know who I think gets a really, really bad rap in the animal world? Hyenas. They gotta eat too. I mean, like, everybody's like,
are you just referring back to like a lion?
Yes, it's a Lion King reference. Yes, it is a Lion King reference. One of my favorite movies. But again,
mine too.
But again, it's
I took my son there. Yeah, that was one of his first movies. It was amazing. Good experience.
I own it in all formats. Anyways, but like my point is that in our mentality, right, in our current morality, we see things like that as evil, right? But A hyena has to eat. A lion has to be able to do that. The difference is, and this is kind of like what we're seeing right now. There are people and primarily our economic system follows that dog eat dog world mentality.
Yeah.
I would agree. It's I mean, if you look at 2008 and the economic collapse of 2008 is the epitome of that mentality at work, right? Because you have some of the brightest and smartest people in the world. I mean, this is not an anecdote. This is a fact. These are bright people taking and stealing money from hardworking individuals and destroying and almost to the point of collapsing our economy for their own purposes. If that's not the epitome of dog eat dog, I don't know what is.
Well,
right?
That's a pretty good example.
Exactly.
Wasn't expecting you to say that.
No, but also at the same token, we look at infractions like that almost a little bit different, right? If we see someone stealing, to survive, they get the penalty. Or if you see a young person, right, smoking weed, they get arrested and all this stuff happens to them. They have to go through the court system. But these individuals, right, who are the strongest in the race, who are the ones that are the top of the food chain, right, doing this without any repercussions. Right. So what you're saying is that although we have an idea that we want to live up to, we're not quite there yet. We're not quite there yet because you see that happening and it happens frequently. The issue with that, and this is what you're seeing throughout our evolution as people, is that mentality doesn't last. It may have its time. And it will cause a lot of pain. And it did cause a lot of pain to a lot of people. But that mentality of the long run in our human evolution won't last. I mean, if you really think about our time, the wars that we've had in the last, let's say, 25 years since the 80s, they're all being kind of like meaningless war. We haven't had a war since that was of meaning since like World War II. Everything else, it's, that is all really man-made in politics. So what does that tell you? There is a minimization of violence all across the board. Do we have incidents that are happening right now? And again, it's because we have ideas that are stuck fighting against another idea, right? And those things are beginning to lose its power too. So we are evolving in the fact that we are becoming less violent against each other and less predatory against each other.
It sounds to me like you have a lot of, I guess, you have a perhaps a stronger hope. I think I'm a little bit more cynical about the world, and it's not that I have a different point of view, but I think that sometimes the world just lets me down. And then I put the blame on myself because I say, well, your expectations are too high. And I always say that in my personal life. I'm always like, well, my expectations are too high. When you do that, when you put expectations on people or on things, you're going to be let down because your expectations may be too high for that person or that situation. Yep. But I'm a little bit more cynical about it. And it may be just because I'm not as knowledgeable or I'm not as insightful as you are, and that's okay too. But it just sounds to me like you have a lot more hope in humanity, because we're talking about, at the end of the day, we're talking about humanity, and we're talking about overcoming, for some people, a deeply ingrained sense of, I'm going to stand up for what I believe in, and this is it. And they are very rigid and not very fluid, and they're very linear. And that linear thinking is what's caused so much drama and so much frustration for people. And it just, so when we're talking about this, I think a lot of what you just talked about in our documentary that we watched, or in the documentary that we watched, they talked about the selfish gene theory. And I think that's a lot of what you were just talking about, that selfish gene theory that that's a selfish sort of behavior from what I got from that. So
like the idea of the selfish gene, and is that the idea is like, wait a minute, how can morality and all this stuff come about out of all this chaos that is in nature, right? All this chaos, or this eating each other up, and all that. How can morality arise from that? Mm-hmm. But it did, right? It started with telling stories, mythology, religion. They're all stories. A myth is not a lie. A myth is a story that conveys some type of a message, Right. It's looking past the poetry of it all to understand what the message is. I mean, that's why if you listen to Joseph Campbell, to Alan Watts, to somebody like Nietzsche, who really said God is dead and man has killed it, there's stories behind all these things there, and you gotta kind of like cipher through that to be able to understand what he's saying, right? So in order for us to understand that selfish gene, what we have to know is, number one, the word selfish, and it denotes something negatively, right? And it does. But selfish is something that starts with the self, right? And the self means something completely different, defined by Carl Jung as the center of everything that you are, right? And that everything from where everything comes from, which is that quote unquote energy that we don't know how to define. No, we're going to define it. No, because we're not going to do that, because we don't know what it is. We just know that there's something, right? Mm-hmm. That's the self, right? So if your decisions and things like that come from that, you start seeing that people take care of each other.
Right.
Animals take care of each other.
They do. I was just going to say, that's an animal. That's an animalistic behavior. It is. Yeah.
So, when you see the penguins hurtling in the middle of the winter, when the zebras,
when the chimpanzees and the monkeys are grooming each other.
Yeah. It's like totally.
They nurture each other.
They nurture each other. You see that in nature. Mm-hmm. We do the same thing.
Right.
So we started with like little groups, right?
Right.
We started with our culture. Then I
think specifically we start with our families.
Yes,
then but we move into cultures and our tribe. And our
races.
Our tribe. Shout out to Maria. The tribe.
Races and things like that.
Yeah.
But now we've gone beyond that.
Right.
Now we really are a global tribe, and we all know that there's experiment of going to Mars, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. So
we're gonna miss that. Are we going to miss that?
I don't know. We'll go there as dust.
Oh.
Space dust.
Space dust. Yeah, I like that.
But now we're beginning to realize, wait a minute, in order for all of us to survive, for our species to continue down the genes, we got to do something, because this is not working. Mm-hmm. So the selfish gene comes from that, because now we're understanding, holy shit, we're destroying the ocean, mm-hmm. we're destroying the forest, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. We're eating each other financially, because right now our economic system, as good as it gives opportunity to people, it cannibalizes people.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, it's like, we're doing things, and some of us beginning to realize that it doesn't feel right. Yeah. And that right there is your soul speaking, that thing that's inside of you that is part of everything, saying to the person, okay, something's not right. Here we go. So again, evolution, yes, it starts with an animal deciding, I need to go eat better food. I want to pass my genes. And as we progress, our brains grew. We were able to begin to ask questions, beginning to build things, to come together, to understand things a little bit deeper. Some of us got stuck in certain areas, and that branch never grew anymore. But another thing came from another side, so it's like, and you see this shape in nature, right? You see like dry riverbanks, dry river deltas that have the branches. When lightning comes down, it goes in different ways. Water follows the path of least resistance. You see this everywhere, because it is within us to be able to ask questions. And it's like, why is that? I don't know. That sounds good, but I want to know more. and more. There's that inside of us that wants to know more and that wants to give more, you know, and that's where a soul's quest begin. When you start at that point, now you might be stuck in something in different ways along the path, but you still have to make that choice.
Right. So I was going to ask you about to end this, because sadly we're running out of time. But I think that you really sort of touched on the macro, you know, level, and sort of bringing that to a close, and the micro level with the self, and then the tribe, and the society and communities. But
I mean, it's what happens in the macro. You know, I remember last year at work, you know, they had this line. It's like, we don't want to get too much into the weeds of this. You know, we don't want to get too much into the weeds. But I'm sorry to tell you that in the weeds is where things happen.
Right.
You know, you could have a vision and you could have a direction as to where you go, but it's up to that individual. And that's what the macro is. But again, some people have an idea and they convince others to follow that idea, and that's okay. Right. Because there are visionaries, there are artists, there are people out there they want to do something different, right? And that's okay, because you set an outline. But for the soul, for an individual, which is our concern, right? It is that person, regardless of where they are. They could be at the top of the food chain or at the bottom of the food chain. The choices that you make, how you live your life, really affect the projection of how our world. How our world is going to go. And it is that simple, because you may think this is insignificant what I do, but when you flick somebody off, or you say something nice to somebody, or you smile, or you have a bad day and then you take it out on somebody else, like, I'm not saying that you have to be a robot. I'm not saying that, but you have to be cognizant that you are significant. Right. Extremely significant. Yeah. And it may feel like you're not a celebrity, so a lot of this stuff it doesn't matter. But I'm here to tell you, they matter the least, because they are some of the people that we don't want to be like. We looked at them with pity, not with admiration. You know, so I see a janitor at a school that's friendly with all the kids, that says high five, you know, that cleans up after them. As someone just as valuable, if not much so, than the head fund manager that just sold 100 people's houses without any remorse whatsoever and no penalty. And that person also had the choice to say no. Right. But it still had a lot of animal instincts inside of them, and they couldn't fight that, unfortunately. Right. Hopefully they feel the remorse and they begin to act in a different way. Right. And that's evolution.
Oh, that's a good way to close. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. That was good. Thank you.
That's all right.
Thanks so much for joining us. I just appreciate you sharing all those things. That was important.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, if you haven't already checked out all our social media websites, please do so. And also check out our website at asoulsquest.com. Thanks so much.